So very big welcome to our panel discussion this afternoon. We're looking at seeking equity for midwifery. As you know, there's been just a little process underway for the last few years. So I'm just going to very quickly introduce each of our speakers. As you know from your books, Karen Gilliland was going to be one of the speakers on this panel, but unfortunately she's unwell today. So Alison Eddy has stepped in and will present Karen's presentation. Alison's a midwifery advisor and the Deputy CEO of the college. She's a practising midwife and has been a key member of the mediation and co-design teams. We also have Nicole Pehema. Nicole is a practising rural community midwife. Nicole's an awesome advocate for Māori workforce and students, a mentor and board member of the Ngā Manukura o Apapa group. She's Regional NZCOM Chair in Te Tai Tokoro in the Northland region. She's absolutely passionate about rural Māori health and working to ensure equity of access for all, and also a member of the mediation and co-design teams. We have Kiriana Brooking. Kiriana is the Deputy Director for Service Commissioning at the Ministry of Health. She previously held the position of Chief Advisor, System Integration for the Ministry of Health. Before this, she was the Planning and Funding Manager at Tairāwhiti District Health, where she oversaw the birth of the Tūranganui Primary Health Organisation and went on to lead that organisation as Chief Executive. Kiriana is leading the maternity workstream at the Ministry of Health and has a clear intention to work to repair some of the wrongs and create a sustainable service ongoing. We also have wonderful Carolyn Conroy. Carolyn Conroy is a practising midwife for more than 25 years. Carolyn was appointed to the Mayor's co-leader midwifery role in December 2017, and prior to that had been a Mayor's organiser for several years. Jill Ovens joined her in April as the co-leader industrial, and they really are the dynamic duo for Midwifery Union. We also have our final speaker will be Rose Swindells. Rose works in community development and family learning. She's an adult literacy and play centre tutor and facilitates courses for Space and Birthwise. Rose served as a consumer member on the Capital and Coast DHB Maternity Quality and Safety Panel, and she's also a consumer member of the National Maternity Monitoring Group. She's been a consumer member on other Ministry of Health initiatives, including the co-design process, and she has 3 daughters with her partner Robert, campaigns for better housing in Wellington through Renters United. So a very big welcome first to Alison Eddy.
So I'm sure you'll agree that filling Karen's shoes is figuratively and literally a big task. So please be kind to me as I work through her slides and the discussion that she was really hoping to present to you today. So this was in the paper around the time that the college lodged its pay equity claim against the ministry. Well, we'll talk through the history. So just a bit of background. Can I have a show of hands for anyone who was practising as a midwife here in 1993? How many of you in the room? It's a reasonable number. So 1993 was the Maternity Benefits Tribunal finding, which found that equal pay for work of equal value basically found that midwives practising maternity should be paid the same as GPs, and that was the setting of the pay rates at that point. So we thought we'd won pay equity back in the day, and where we found ourselves in 2015 was not in a pay equity situation. So we'll talk through what happened from there. 1964, this quote is from, and I'll leave you to read it, but it actually shows you that the discussion around pay equity has been around for decades, and I think there's a fundamental issue that women's work is not seen or valued in the same way as men's work. There's something about it that is invisible, or that is not valued or held in the same esteem because it's perceived as women's work rather than being something that men do. So 2015, the college took a court action against the Ministry of Health. We were advised that the only legal route we had to seek any redress around what we believe is a gender issue of discrimination against midwives as a women's workforce was to take a case against the gender discrimination through the Human Rights legislation. That was what we did, and there was a long time leading up to that point, before we lodged that case, a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of discussion, a lot of beating on closed doors. At the 11th hour and 59 minutes, we agreed to mediation with the ministry, and we had a series of meetings between August 2016 and December that resulted in a series of mediation agreements. I think it's fair to say it was an uncomfortable process to start with. It wasn't an easy place to be. There was a lot of mistrust, a lot of hostility, a lot of angst, a lot of uncertainty. Throughout the process, we developed a good relationship, I think. We felt we developed an understanding of the issues with the ministry in a way that was constructive and positive. We felt we were making progress, so we continued to mediate, and we came through with a series of mediation agreements, and this is from the third mediation agreement, which is probably where we felt we were really starting to get on the home straight. And as you can see there, we'd agreed to redesign the funding model. We had a clear agreement with the ministry that Section 88 didn't meet the needs of midwives in today's world, and that we needed a new funding model, and from our perspective, that needed to have a gender equity lens over it. And we had this agreement with the ministry that that would be part of the process. This was our final agreement with the ministry, and this again is just, I'll leave you to read it, but it's setting out how the process was going to unfold. We were pretty optimistic. We felt we'd hit a home run. Given that we don't have a legal mandate to do this, we didn't have a legal mandate to do it, we're not a union, the LMCs have no rights as individuals, the college had taken on the role of advocacy in the absence of any other organisation, we thought we'd actually done pretty well. In the meantime, we know there was a political campaign running, the midwives were feeling increasingly stretched and upset about the working conditions and the pay that they were receiving, the expectations that were placed upon them, and that's not news to you. So, what happened? The budget came and went, and lo and behold, it wasn't what we expected. So we requested the ministry's documents under the Official Information Act, and it was really clear from that the budget bid hadn't included the co-design. It would seem that the concept of equal pay was actually unacceptable to the ministry. We've lodged a complaint with the ministry that they've breached the agreement. We've actually given them notice that we may consider further legal action based on our lawyer's advice. But they did respond. We had a letter back on Monday, and in that there was an acknowledgement that that they didn't meet the mediation agreement. They clearly agree that they want to make it right. They want us to keep talking, and that the co-design isn't dead. They've actually have implemented some elements of it in the budget this year, and have told us that they want to continue looking at it as an opportunity for the future contract model, which we've agreed needs to be developed. So I guess the question is there light at the end of the tunnel? And I think that the important point is that all of this happens in a very political context, as we know. We've had a change of government, and there's been a change of leadership in the ministry, and we have had a change of staff that we're working with, and we know that maternity has become a ministry priority. I think you're all aware that the ministry's got a big work program on at the moment that this rework of funding for LMCs is just a part of. There's a bigger look around some of the systemic issues that seem to be backgrounding the things that we're dealing with. So that's a positive, actually, and we also had a verbal reassurance that the co-design will be looked at as part of the renegotiation, and there'll be a renegotiation around the price. So we've also had a commitment that the ministry will arrange a meeting for the ministers with us to discuss and enable us to put forward our case around how we feel aggrieved about the way we've been treated by previous ministry staff. And what we would like to achieve from that is actually a formalised plan as to how we're to go forward and recognising the issues that we want to raise and around the equity issue. A little bit like the Accord, I guess, with NZNO. We want to achieve a similar sort of agreement that's clear and has a status and actually commits to looking at how we're going to address the issues.
Ko te mea tuatahi e mihi au ki ngā tangata whenua. Maunga taniwha te maunga, tāpapa te awa, mamari te waka, ngā pui me te raroa o ku iwi, ko hatu taka te hapu, rahiri te tangata, ko Nicole Pia Mahau. Who am I? I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie, and I'm a friend. But I'm also a midwife. I'm not a grandmother yet, so I'll just stick with midwife for now. I'm also the chair of the Northern region of the college, and I have been a member of the mediation team and the co-design team in collaboration with the Ministry of Health. I'm currently practicing in a rural remote location in the mid-north of the North Island in Northland, and I'm a Māori midwife working primarily with 70% of my wahine are Māori, and of that 85% of my piepi are also Māori. So there's a significant number of Māori women that would be affected by seeking equity. In the last 2 years, I have been part of that team that's been representing you, and a lot that comes along with that, there are a lot of responsibilities. It's actually quite a heavy, I suppose, burden at times to carry the wants and wishes of my colleagues and of everyone's words around the motu to take into these negotiations. It has been quite a trying time, and we know that historically, midwives have worked hard for equity, regardless of what it was, whether it was pay or conditions, and just to be able to work as a midwife. So we're fighters, and we have that historical background and foundation, and we continue to build upon those foundations. So as a Māori midwife, how does this impact seeking equity? So I suppose really things that are closest to my heart, I'm going to briefly talk about, is about reducing barriers to access of care. So with 70% of women who are wahine who are Māori, many of those women, they're possibly put into vulnerable category. Vulnerable depends on whose definition of vulnerable is. These women may not actually see themselves as vulnerable, so in and itself is already creating barriers in place for them to access our care when we get in other care as well that's available. Seeking equity, there are obviously lots and lots of benefits in regards to seeking equity, but seeking equity for ourselves, yes, that's definitely a goal, but by seeking equity for ourselves, we're seeking equity for the wahine and the whānau that are in our care. Caseload reductions, working, I suppose a working wage, as they say. Is it affordable? Not for midwives. We know that the work that we do, and I know that Deb said last night at the AGM, it's not about getting paid more for the work that we do, but just about getting paid for the work that we do. So, we historically we raised our children in communities. They were fed, clothed and educated and disciplined in these communities. And Māori women are increasingly booking late, and the barriers to access to them booking late. We all see it, and it's not just Māori women as well, it's Pacifica women. We talk about minorities, but that's another day. So, I'm running out of time, here we go. So what are the challenges that we're faced? We're relying on colleagues. I've been reliant on my colleagues to care for my caseload while I've been fighting the fight. And it does take a lot of demanding time on not just my professional life, but also my personal life. As midwives, we have make lots of sacrifices, and these are some of the additional sacrifices that I've made. When you walk into a marae, you take the responsibility, and your shoulders become heavy with your ancestors, with your tūpuna. And basically, walking in to these negotiations, it was a similar occurrence. Basically the weight of everyone in this room. And to be honest, it's kind of like you're the converted. So it's almost like the message that we're giving today is so that you can take that back to instill that in your colleagues out there. So seeking equity is also about supporting midwifery organisations. So we have our college, of course, we have MERIS, and we also have MMPO, and it's about supporting one another, because if we're divided, seeking equity, there are large barriers in place to that. So our strongest voice is if we are together, mahi tahi, kōrero tahi. So I feel in my heart that midwives and women deserve the recognition that they rightly deserve. Value yourself so that others can value us, because if we don't value ourselves, how do we expect others to do that? There we go. So I'll leave it up to the rest, but really the message that I want to put across, the whole message around the conference has been one voice. It really is about mahi tahi, so working together, and it's about kōrero tahi, and having those conversations, and sometimes those hard conversations, and lip service isn't good enough. If we make a promise, then let's see some action. So, ko mutu tēnei mihi, tēnei ahi ahi, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa.
Ko Takitimu Te Waka, ko Tangitu Te Moana, ko Maunga Hararu Ki Ita, ko Mohaka Te Awa, ko Ngāti Parau Te Iwi, Ngāti Parau, my husband's iwi, Ngāti Pāhauara Te Iwi. He'll be thanking me for that. Ko Kiriana Brooking tōku ingoa, he mahi ana ki te manatū hauora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, nā mihi nunui, nā mihi mahana ki a koutou, particularly to I see my tairāwhiti lot over there, kia ora. In late March 2018, I was asked by the Interim Director General of the Ministry of Health to take a leadership role in the relationship with NZCOM and more recently, maternity more broadly. I know that this panel has a focus on seeking equity for midwifery. I will cover that somewhere in my 5 minutes, but I want to cover some other items or observations first. Why was I asked? Why did I agree? I'm a firm believer of mana-enhancing practice and mana-enhancing relationships. For me, this means time must be taken to make connections to both place and people. These connections provide a strong foundation upon which work should be built. Also, to uphold the mana of everyone involved, the way we work is as important as what we work on. In my discussion with NZCOM people and members over the past 4 months, I have seen and heard anger, frustration, exhaustion, sadness, integrity, engagement, humour, and professionalism often mixed together in the same conversation. As a senior ministry official, I know that we haven't consistently kept our commitments in the way the ministry has behaved, the leadership role we play, and also the work we have agreed to do. And I am sorry that that has been your experience. So I acknowledge where midwifery in New Zealand has come from and where you are now. And I acknowledge that the ministry has many, many things it has to do our part better to uphold the mana of everybody involved from this moment, every day, every day. So when you are me in a place where understandably there are experiences that have led to no or little trust, when as midwives wanting to maintain and strengthen the midwifery in partnership with women continuity of care model, when you in this room often feel more days like you are under siege or in survival mode, where do we go to next? I attended the end of the AGM last night and caught the Mayor's update from Caroline and Jill. I'll leave Caroline to talk in her 5 minutes about DHB-employed core midwives, but I do want to acknowledge the Mayor's well-formulated pay equity claim. And the Mayor's developed and well-endorsed and supported safe staffing standards for maternity facilities, and I am quietly optimistic about the time ahead of us. I lead the development of a maternity work program that before Christmas will be presented to the Minister. It will contain many implementation statements covering many topics. I'll not cover those now, but I am here till lunchtime tomorrow, so I'm happy to talk with anybody about that more. But turning to community midwifery and my thoughts and commitments, I can say that it will contain the establishment of a national midwifery organisation by the 30th of June 19 to be a provider, to lead to the establishment of a national maternity a national primary maternity contract by the 30th of June 2020, that the services described in the contract will be created from the useful parts of the Section 88 and from the NZCOM Ministry of Health co-design work. That the funding requests will be considered as part of Budget 19 and 20 to improve the primary maternity service price. Lastly, as part of the primary maternity agreement changes, the payment approach will change and again will be using the co-design work as the change base. So 3 last things in my 7 seconds, but I'll be quick. I apologise for the way the Ministry has treated the mana of the co-design work and the people that worked so hard for it and with it. Our new Director General and I have signalled our intent to address that, but I know we have some ground to make up. While I've focused on the soon, I have a clear understanding of the serious of the now, and work every day with people in this room and many others on turning this around. To me, like you, it feels like trying to sprint through setting concrete. But I feel and I know I've got the newness vibe, but I feel we remain committed. As I've said to some of you before, it requires mahi connected by 1,000 ends. And in the words of the late Professor Ranginui Walker, this is a struggle without end. Kia ora to the late Tahemi Henare, who said, "Kua tawhiti ko tō tātou haerenga ki te kore e haere tonu. He tino nui rawa a tātou mahi, kia kore e mahi nui tonu. We have come too far not to go further. We've done too much not to do more." So I stand here today to acknowledge and listen and understand. Ngā mihi, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Okay. This afternoon at an earlier session on health equity for Māori, the speaker there defined inequity as a difference that is unfair, unjust and unavoidable. And I thought that was a good line to open my presentation on the equity for employed midwives. The challenges facing employed midwives in terms of equity or inequity could be summed up in 4 key points. A dominant nursing culture within the DHBs, the invisibility of midwifery outside of maternity, the workload and the pay. To understand the origins of these, we need to look back to the early 20th century. Until 1925, midwifery had its own separate regulatory body, separate from nursing. That changed with the introduction of the Nurses and Midwives Registration Act, which regulated both nursing and midwifery, and changed midwifery to a postgraduate course. In the 1930s, nurses supported the Obstetrical Society agenda to promote doctors and nurses caring for women in St Helens hospitals, and the expectation that maternity nurses would replace midwives and all maternity care would be under medical jurisdiction. Further legislative changes subsumed midwifery into nursing, and it was not until 1989, with the formation of the New Zealand College of Midwives, and 1990 Nurses Amendment Act, that things started to change. And even though midwifery has now had its own regulatory body in the form of the Midwifery Council for several years, how often do we still see this? The continual linkage of midwives to nurses perpetuates the notion that somehow the two are interchangeable or there is very little difference. It is this linkage with nursing that makes it difficult for midwifery to be visible within the DHB culture, dominated by the larger nursing workforce. This linkage with nursing has also effectively silenced midwifery outside of the maternity service. This is the typical representation of the executive leadership group in a DHB. So often there's more people in suits on these, to put put it bluntly. The midwifery voice is missing from this group, with midwifery leaders reporting to directors of nursing or directors of nursing and midwifery. Even in the rare instance where a director of nursing and midwifery actually has a midwifery annual practicing certificate, this combined role still perpetuates the linkage with nursing and undermines midwifery as a separate profession. Interestingly, allied health do have representation at the executive level of DHBs. And yet I know in at least one DHB that the DHB employed midwives outnumber allied health staff in that DHB. So quite why they have a place at the top table and midwives don't, we wonder. Without a voice at the top level of the organisation, it is easy to see why midwifery is invisible, and there is little understanding about the role of midwives by those outside of maternity, and why organisational-wide initiatives get rolled out to maternity that have little relevance to the service. Midwifery is not nursing by another name. And I think we heard from Sally Pearman this morning too, the issues from overseas as well in terms of that linkage with nursing. This history and linkage to nursing has meant that the role and responsibilities of a midwife have not been properly understood. The lack of a midwifery voice at senior levels of the DHB have also meant that the acute, unpredictable, 24/7 nature of a birthing suite and the unique nature of a postnatal ward, with its two clients in that bed, the mother and the baby, in each bed space, is not properly understood. And this has resulted in an unsustainable workload for midwives. The linkage with nursing has also influenced pay rates, with employed midwives traditionally being paid the same as nurses. And this has meant that the pay rates for employed midwives do not reflect the scope of practice or responsibilities that employed midwives have. It's time for change. We're on a journey now to achieve equity for employed midwives. MIRIS was established by the College of Midwives as a union for employed midwives 12 years ago. And MIRIS membership has grown, and it now represents 85% of employed midwives, and I think it might have increased a bit more after this conference. MIRIS is seeking a pay differential from nursing in its current DHB pay negotiations, and MIRIS has also lodged a pay equity claim for employed midwives. We want to lead that process, so every single midwife that comes into MIRIS actually helps us ensure that everybody understands we are the voice for employed midwives. Equity for employed midwives can only be achieved if we stand together. That's it. Okay.
Mauri ora ki te whare, he uria hau ki airani ingarangi hoki, I te puakia hau ki ahuriri no ahuriri taku mama. Kei te whanganui a tāra mātu e noho ana I nai nei. Ko Rose Swindells taku ingoa, ko Robert Whittaker taku tāni, ko... there they are. Ko Bernadette rātou, ko Josephine, ko Teresa aku tamariki. Tēnā koutou wahine whakawhānau mā. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, midwives. I'm Rose and I live in Wellington and I feel very honoured to be speaking to you, especially because of the emotion in the room. I suddenly feel it too. But I feel very honoured because, like many women in Aotearoa, you've been with me in some of the scariest and happiest moments of my life. Midwives cheered me through my first birth, which was a caesarean section. Midwives have helped me through 2 labours, saying very little, but just the right amount. Midwives have held my hand during a miscarriage. Midwives have empowered me to make my own decisions and also steered me away from ridiculously but oddly all-consuming worries like, will the birth pool get so heavy that it falls through the floor onto our downstairs neighbours? Midwives have also rolled their eyes with me at endless meetings where we were told that just because DHBs were funded to deliver maternity services didn't mean they had to deliver fully staffed maternity services. Much of your work, like much of my work as a mother, is unpaid. This picture is from an exhibition called Power Jacket, commemorating 125 years of women's suffrage. Artists were asked to customise a jacket, and my friend, artist Sonia Nagels, created this jacket inspired by something our Prime Minister said just before she had baby Neve. When asked how Winston would cope, she said, "I'm not dead. I have not exited from the country. I will just be in Sandringham." Sonia lives in Sandringham too, and her jacket forces us to remember that mothers don't disappear when they have babies. They are still here, in fact, doing some of the most important work they have ever done, of course, supported by midwives. That's me doing some of my most important work. The postpartum woman and the midwife alongside her are doing work that is largely invisible and certainly not valued by the media and the society at large. As our babies grow up, women, whether they return to paid work or not, continue to do invisible work. We care for others in our families and communities. We make meals for families who need them. We take kids for play dates when their parents are busy. We go on school trips. We organise school galas. We do the washing, the cooking, the recycling. And many midwives are mothers doing both jobs at the same time. Women's invisible work is nourishing the next generation and holding our whole society together. However, increasingly, women and midwives can't do it anymore. Last year, I was part of the attempt to design a new pay model for community midwifery. And we worked really hard, and I also felt the weight of all those consumers with me when I was in those discussions. And one of the things we kept thinking about is who can we compare an LMC midwife with? A GP, no, not a nurse, not a social worker, not an educator. Midwives are all these things, but they are also more. They are unique because of their role in women's lives, the way they support women, and the nature of birth itself. Midwives, you really need pay equity. You need to be paid fairly for the work you do. This is my daughter and her friend Taitor on the March for Midwives earlier this year. And we know, as Nicole said, if you get paid properly, that will make a massive difference in the lives of the many families you support. Mothers want you to continue to be at the heart of our maternity system. We want you to be with us. But at the moment, mothers and midwives are far from speaking with one voice. In part, this is because of how our system is set up. You value your independence, and women value it too. You fit into our busy lives. But one consequence of this is that women view their experience as an individual one. If we had a good experience, it was because we were so lucky to get our amazing midwife. If things don't go to plan, well, was it partly the midwife's fault? The result, midwifery as a whole, is not valued to the extent it should be. So we need to find ways to build a more coherent, collective voice for mothers and midwives, and I believe that pay equity can drive this. My hope is that, as well as getting what you deserve, the pay equity process brings midwives and women together. And I hope that the pay equity process delivers equity as well as pay. Thank you.
So I think you probably saw some of the emotion there when Kiriana spoke, and I think you can't really underestimate the amount of work and the amount of heart and soul that has gone into the work around the co-design. And I'm pretty sure that was the first time that Nicole had heard that there would be a national provider organisation and a national contract, and that the co-design principles would form be what guided that work. And that is an amazing achievement, and thank you so much for that, Kiriana. Have we got some time for questions? Yeah. Would anybody like to ask any questions of the panel? Silence. Come up here. Push the bottom there.
Kia ora koutou, ko Katarina Kōmini tōku ingoa, no tai toki rau hau. So I currently have just started a new role with Counties Manukau District Health Board and the Māori Health Team as Program Manager Māori Child Health. And it wasn't a question, just a comment to Kiriana and the Ministry of Health. That so recently I was invited to be a part of a hui that was held down at Ministry in Wellington, middle of July I think it was. And I just want to acknowledge Kiriana and her team and the Ministry for what is a really exciting time for us. And I just want to encourage everybody and say, hold the faith, because I think with this new group that are pushing and striving for a change in maternity services, that the future of maternity services and midwifery in New Zealand is looking positive. And I'm hoping that they've recorded Kiriana's talk today. But
I'll get my speech notes put on the website.
that's great, because I feel Nicole's manawa, her aroha, her tears today, because, you know, I've sat with Nicole and Hui and we've talked for hours on the phone about the work that this team have put into the co-design and just how devastated they were at the result from the last budget. So, you know, just her tears are of happiness, I know that, and feeling encouraged that the ministry that are going to actually stick to what they say they were going to do for the future of midwifery in our country. So, ngā mihi nui kia koe, Kiriana. Look forward to meeting you again soon in counties, as we've talked about in email, and looking forward to a positive change in our midwifery workforce and system in New Zealand. Kia ora koutou. Ngā mihi.
I just wanted to just publicly acknowledge Kiriana's apology. It's what made me cry. It gives us great faith, and it actually, that acknowledgement, we understand we just really want to acknowledge that you took thoughtfully and genuinely took the time to do that in this forum, and how that wouldn't have been an easy place for you to be. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you. But I also want to say this is a watershed time for maternity and midwifery, and I think we need to be really careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have had such distress within the profession, and I think Norma touched on it in her discussion this morning. Where we are now as a profession is not where we want to be, and what this means for women and for midwives and the way we work, and the points that Rose made about what the model offers to women and to midwives. Actually, when we work with women in this way, it's what professionally satisfies us, and we have to be careful that we don't lose sight of that and throw the baby out with the bathwater, for want of a better pun.
I've just got a very quick thing. Thank you, all the co-design team. As a midwife working out as core and LMC, I know both sides of it, and I'm really grateful for all the hard work you've done, our Violet in our region, all of you. And so personally, and I think from lots of midwives, yeah, we're not particularly happy about what happened to budget, but I'm really, really grateful. Thank you so much.
I think maybe Violet should join us up here. Are you in the audience, Violet? So we do have quarter of an hour still if anybody has more questions that they'd like to ask or anybody that wants to make a comment. Violet, do you want to say anything?
Thank you. Yes, I am also a member of the co-design team, and I think the rollercoaster ride continues for us collectively as a profession, but also within the group who I guess are at the coalface negotiating with the ministry, flying that flag for midwives and for women, and that work is not done yet. We continue, and what gives me great faith is that I see we continue this work with people like Kiriana who are coming to us honest and true and making a real commitment to work together with us. That is where my hope lies, and I believe that there is a path forward from what we've heard today. So, as it's been said, kia kaha, we stay strong together, we continue to work, and I think the emotion that you can see here today, what I hope is that it reveals to you how much the co-design team have poured their heart and soul in to this process and how devastating it has been for us individually and collectively, because we really have gone into that process feeling like we have the weight of our profession on our shoulders, and we've worn that emotionally as well. So thank you so much, Kiriana, for those words. We take them and we move forward with positivity and in a collaborative fashion, I hope.
And thank you also to Rose, our consumer on this. I mean, I think that it's so important that we keep what we're here for at the base of everything we do. And Rose is just amazingly articulate. I tell you, at NMMG, it's so like having another midwife there. She stands up for midwifery. She even gave the minister a hard time. She's fantastic. So thank you, Rose, for the work that you do.
I'm Kathy LMC from up in Warkworth, here with a few of my colleagues. Kiriana, great to hear what you had to say. For myself, being very much involved in day-to-day care of women, and also not only been around the country again for the last 10 years, I'm a little bit slow in catching up with the implications of what you've said, and just wondered if my practical translation of what you're saying is correct. Is what you said that there would be consideration in the budget in 2019 and 2020 for changes, and provider organisation changing in 2019. That's just a plan implemented in 2020. I'm just a little bit kind of wanting the practicalities. That's all.
Fair enough. So the idea is that we move away from the Section 88 notice. There is a lot of people who feel very strongly, including myself, that it doesn't enable us to do the types of things that we need to do now and in the future as it relates to primary maternity. I'm not saying that there aren't elements of the Section 88 notice that we want to see pulled through into primary maternity, but it's my hope that for those who want to move from Section 88 notice, and I'm taking a punt, it will be a few of you, that we move from a Section 88 notice by the 1st of July 2020. So that means a couple of things. We do have to have and it did come strongly through the co-design process, that we have to have a national provider organisation, a mechanism for us to move to an agreement. That's not the college. The college have been clear about that. The college have been clear about what their role is. So in order for us to move out of a Section 88 notice, we do have to move to an arrangement where there is a provider, and the recommendation was that there would be a national provider organisation. There was also a recommendation around what was called a blended payment model. And so from our perspective, if we're moving into a primary maternity agreement, we will be looking at how the payments are constructed. And we will also have to take into account things like caseloads, like rurality, like acuity, social. There's a whole host of things that we'll have to do, which is why I can't promise it from the 1st of July 19, because there is a few things that we have to work through. However, in doing that, and I am purposeful that I said 1920, not because I want to say out years, but we all choose who comes in again in September 20. So I can't speak beyond that. But what I can say is that we are actively putting in budget bids for budget 19 and for budget 20. Now, it's not just going to be about the community midwifery primary maternity agreement, because there is specific stuff we're going to have to do about the workforce pipeline. There's work that we have to do around locuming. There's other activities that I would see we would be putting in for 1920. And I know I'm specifically talking about community midwifery, and I also know that there is a core midwifery, and I'm not excluding that, but I'm answering your question specifically in relation to primary maternity. So I hope that's made it a little bit clearer.
Yes,
for those of you who have worked under agreement arrangements before, we do have to work out things like service specifications. However, I've read both the background information and the recommendations that have come out of the co-design, and there's much of that we could just lift and shift. Secondly, I know that it has had a relatively, I don't want to say the word, so I'd say confidential component to it. There was a group that worked very solidly on your behalf, but I do imagine over the next period we are going to bring it out and have some discussions, further discussions that will shape the shape of the primary maternity agreement. Sorry, long answer, everybody, but I wanted to be as full as I could.
Thank you. And just one other thing, just to acknowledge Carolyn's presentation as well. I mean, we're all one workforce. We can't fix one bit without fixing the other bit, and it is so important that both of these processes happen alongside each other, and that we absolutely get together and support both the midwives working in an employed situation and those that are working in a self-employed situation. And actually, when we're looking at the whole of system, which is kind of what Kiriana will be doing as part of the work that's happening nationally, we have to bring all of that together and look at how it looks and how it works going forward. So it is a big job, but it's I think we're in pretty awesome hands actually with Kiriana at the lead. So let's just cross our fingers and hope nothing dramatic happens with the ministry restructure. We've told her she's not allowed another job, so she'll have to stay.
I've heard you on that.
Good. Any other final questions?
I just wanted to briefly touch on the national provider that Kiriana has mentioned and the college's role in that. I think we've become the agency that has been leading this on behalf of midwifery because there is no other agency. But if you think about the role of a professional college, it's education, it certainly is advocacy, but it's not usually pay negotiation. And the development of a national provider to discreetly have a body that can represent the financial interests and pay issues for self-employed midwives is what we want to achieve, so that role will be devolved from the college to that. Not saying that the college will not have an interest in what that might be, because we want to make sure that professional aspects of practice are not compromised by the contract that midwives would work within. But I think it's muddied our role, and it's caused a lot of angst and confusion and despair, and it's led us in some midwives' eyes that in some way we've failed the profession, and that's not our intention, and we don't think that's what we wanted to do at any level. But I just wanted to clarify that was the thinking behind the national provider, and also to have a national contract so that it secures the conditions for midwives and creates a place where there's a collective voice rather than it being DHB by DHB negotiation.
Thank you very much. Yep. Oh, sorry, there's one more question while Sue's walking up.
Sorry, it's me again. I just wondered how we could get this out to everybody who's not at the conference, because, you know, we're all preaching to the converted a bit here. Can I ask the college to put this great news out to everybody? Can we get it out quickly? I know it needs to be concise and correct, but if we're slow, then somebody else will get out and then it'll be, oh, how come we heard from Google? And that's not what we want. So can I just encourage that?
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I think we have indeed just experienced a watershed moment in the world of New Zealand midwifery. My heart is aching that Karen wasn't here to hear Kiriana today, but it has been recorded, and so she will be watching in detail, I imagine, when she is well again. I just want to ask you to give one final round of appreciation for the work of the co-design team and Karen.